Sooner Nation. OU Insider subscribers, I've really become a caricature of myself in those intros. OU Insider subscribers, Coach Brian Clinton enthusiasts, people who are excited as of Thursday afternoon that the Thunder are 2-0 in the playoffs, up 2 games on the Grizzlies. They resume that series tonight at 8:30. That is my entire priority this evening. This is the podcast for you. This is another episode of The Oklahoma Drill, a podcast fueled by OU Insider and the Rivals Network. I am Jesse Crittenden, and I'm joined as always by Mr. Thunder, Mr. Brian Clinton.
Hello, Jesse.
So I have a. Should I just keep going up and up in register and octave,
and then eventually I'll take over.
Could it,
and I'll
okay, yeah. When I lose,
and maybe that's how it should be. You should be hello, and then I should log us off with a goodbye.
I wonder if I should go. You know those tests that are like, if you can hear this noise, you're under 35 or whatever.
Yes.
Should I just keep going up and up until only?
Yes. And I'll set the Stream Deck up to have a voice changer, so we continue having you go higher and higher.
Well, it'd also be an indicator of how old I am, because the older I get, the less I'll be able to go up, and the less stamina I'll have.
Yes. He's talking about his voice, people. Back on track.
Brian, we actually technically haven't done a pod in 2 weeks because our pod last week got lost in the ethers of obscurity.
The intrawebs.
That sounds like a weird band name from the late 80s or the ethers of obscurity. Or like a System of a Down album.
It's like
or something.
Jack Black from School of Rock.
Yeah.
It sounds like
The Legend of the Rent.
Name. Yes.
Yeah. So basically, this is our first pod to address some portal additions for Oklahoma. We need to talk about OU Texas softball, because we technically haven't actually recorded in a recorded way since even before the OU Mississippi State series. OU swept that series, and now we need to talk about OU Texas softball. But in the interest of talking about current things, Brian, in the interest of staying up to date with what the kids are talking about, let's talk very briefly about David Stone, just so that we can say we talked about it on this pod, and that we can put a bow on it and then never talk about it again. Okay. Does that sound good?
Yeah, sounds great.
David Stone, this is Spark Notes. This is Cliff Notes. David Stone's with OU, and then he briefly wasn't with OU, and now he's back with OU. Maybe that's all we need to say. Actually, this is what I want to say. I don't really want to talk about the ins and outs of why he hit the portal and the super complexities of the transfer portal and its impact, and NIL and its impact on student athletes at Power 4 programs, especially. I don't know if we need to go into the ins and outs of that. There was a lot of toxicity. That's a System of a Down song. There was a lot of toxicity around that discussion that, frankly, I wasn't interested in engaging with. A lot of toxicity. But let's instead talk about just how important it was for OU to get David Stone back in the fold. So I think for you, I hand off to you. You can pick any direction you want. You can pick from a on the field perspective this coming year, from an on the field perspective in future years, from a roster stability, from a broad picture of the transfer portal itself, whatever angle you want to take. How important was it for OU to get David Stone back in the fold?
That was huge. I mean, absolutely. You look at what they had he decided to leave, what they had on the interior of the defensive line, like they would have been okay, but this helps them maintain their ability to be great, not just in 25, but like going forward. He and Jaden Jackson being together next to each other for the next however many years That's a big deal. I think the biggest thing that I take away from it though is you look at the momentum that Oklahoma had in the transfer portal, which I also believe is going to carry over into the recruiting, the high school recruiting ranks with Jim Nagy being in charge. It keeps that kind of like the status quo. So I think it's a huge deal. Like you said, there's a lot of nuances and a lot of things in that situation that, quite frankly, you and I really don't have to or need to get into because it's not really our business. But we just look at what Oklahoma is able to do, and they keep a kid that wanted to be a Sooner, has always wanted to be a Sooner, and is still a Sooner.
So I disagree about it not being our business. And in fact, I'm going to Twitter right now with no sourcing and no information. And I'm going to Twitter and crafting such an engagement bait tweet, the likes that anybody has ever seen. That's what I'm going to do. That's the responsible thing to do, Brian. Look,
that would be chop suey. Sorry.
Let's just infiltrate the pod full of System of a Down references.
Yeah.
I love that idea. We should do that sometime. Look, no, I agree with you. I thought, and this is what I tried to say to Brandon when Brandon and I recorded that emergency pod when he initially hit the portal, which was Friday night. God, that was almost a week ago. I tried to set I wanted to just focus on it from an on the field perspective, which is that David Stone's going to play in the fall. He's going to play a lot. He's going to play a lot. And and I think what you said in terms of roster momentum and stability, I think when you looked at what OU has added in the portal, even dating back to the winter. I mean, this is especially, including John Mateer. And I think you felt really good about what OU had done in the portal overall. Like, does it hurt to lose a couple guys that OU's lost? Sure. Like, it hurts to lose Lewis Carter. It hurts to lose, Devon Mitchell. Like, sure. But from an actual, this guy is going to play a lot, and without him, that position group suffers. David Stone was going to hurt a lot, because you mentioned, I was even going through the rest of the depth chart for OU, the rest of the roster defensive tackle, and it's like, yeah, you got your top three, that's great, but then you start looking behind that fourth spot, which is what David Stone's probably going to play.
Yeah,
it's like, whew. You're going to be relying on guys without a ton of experience or without the ceiling that David Stone has.
Yeah. Yeah, and not even to mention the backlash that you have just from a PR perspective. Like, it just would have looked terrible.
Yeah. And this is what I'll say from the PR perspective, Brian. This is the one thing I'll say, and then we need to move on to other things. Look, I think David Stone hitting the portal was going to hurt, and actually leaving was going to hurt. Not only from an on the field perspective, but from a fan perspective. I get it. Look, this is not the college football of yesteryear. And with David Stone specifically, when you have a guy that has Oklahoma ties and wanted to be a Sooner, played a pivotal role in his recruiting class of getting other guys involved, and then the actual on the field potential and talent, those guys really hurt to lose, because I think OU fans really had a connection to him. And then out of nowhere, it looks like he's leaving. That hurts. And I can understand if even a situation like this or other ones that have happened or others to come, because Brian, this is going to happen again. Even with revenue sharing is not going to get rid of guys. And I'm not even specifically tying this to the David Stone case, but guys that want more money, or guys that are not happy with their situation for whatever reason, playing time or whatever else.
Yeah,
this is not going to be the last time this happens. So if fans wanted to use this opportunity to actually examine their relationship to the sport, I get that. Look, I question it myself. Even David Stone hitting the portal, man, I got home from softball. OU played at played Mississippi State at Devon Park. I got home, or I got to my girlfriend's apartment. We're just going to watch a movie and relax. And all of a sudden I got to record an emergency pod. And it's like, this is exhausting. It's exhausting. Yep. Having said that, I think there's a healthy amount of self examination or frustration that you can have, but I think all that ultimately ends up mattering is that David Stone's back with Oklahoma.
Yep.
I think that's ultimately what matters. Do you have anything to add to that?
Nope. That's you nailed it. That's exactly how I would have put it.
So now with Stone back, or I guess never left. I don't know what the right way to put it is. Let's talk about these portal additions. Now, OU is still, I think, hoping to make at least a couple of ads, right? They're hosting Tate Sandell, the kicker from UTSA.
Yep.
Actually, kind of a big deal for Oklahoma. They need to get a kicker.
Huge
like really badly. They just need a guy that can be reliable. They don't need a superstar. They need a guy that they know can make a kick from 42 yards out consistently, especially with the schedule they have coming out. They're still going after receiver. I was wondering what that situation was going to be like because I think OU was expecting departures from the wide receiver room. Those haven't really come to pass. So I think valuing wide receiver went down a little bit in terms of guys they wanted to get in the portal. Now they are going after Jermichael Carter from McNeese State. Brian, I don't know if you noticed, but the wide receivers that they have looked at kind of fill a similar void. He's 6'4", kind of a down the field, explosive kind of guy. It's clearly they've targeted a certain archetype at wide receiver. But let's talk about, I know we talked about him, but let's talk about him again. Let's talk about these portal additions. Specifically, I know actually you have published a story since the last time we talked about Jaydn Ott, reviewing the film. OU adds Jaydn Ott out of Cal. And Brian, even since we talked about it last week, the more and more that I've looked at the stats and I read your story and looked at the film, I get more and more excited about this kid and more understanding about why they added him. What did you learn about him watching the film and what he brings to this team?
Well, he's explosive. This is a guy that, it puts Oklahoma in a position that they haven't been in a while. And I think some people may freak out when they hear me say this, but I think the more you think about it, the more you will come to agree. The addition of Jaydn Ott gives Oklahoma the most dynamic quarterback running back combination they've had since Baker Mayfield, Joe Mixon.
I agree with you. I do. I agree with you.
It's a big deal. Now, did they necessarily need a running back? No, but when a guy like that comes available and you can capitalize, he is a difference maker. Immediately in a room full of guys that have talent but have not been able to put it together, that's a guy that has proven production. He's been able to take care of the football in his time, and whenever he's healthy, he is, of all the running backs coming back, he is undoubtedly either 1A or 1B of the guys coming back from last year. So you look at the production, he is, whenever I say explosive, he's probably like a mid 4.4s guy. I don't know what his actual, what his 40 time would be, but he's probably mid 4.4. So he has good long speed, but what really separates him is his ability to explode in the small, in tight spaces. If there's a crease, if you give him a crease, he can absolutely make you pay for that. He is perfect. He's a perfect hand in glove fit for what Ben Arbuckle wants to run at Oklahoma. So you couldn't get any better from that. And then really, like, this is a guy, he's the true definition of an all-purpose back. He's not just a running back that can catch the football out of the backfield. He is a wide receiver out of the backfield. I think he has 3 drops over his career. And I think 117 targets, 3 drops, his 96 receptions. This is a guy that is comfortable in that role. He's comfortable stepping up and helping in pass protection. He's physical. He can run between the tackles, and he can hit you on the outside. The guy, he has all of the tools, and it's somebody that gives. He's going to give SEC defensive coordinators nightmares. It's going to be difficult to keep this guy under wraps, especially when you have to take into consideration how dynamic Oklahoma will be at quarterback this year with Mateer.
I like especially what you said about him kind of being able to fit in tight spaces and make stuff out of nothing, basically, which I think is what it really might be the thing they needed more than anything out of a running back. Yeah. I wanted to ask you though, because you talked about his receiving ability, how much, especially looking at like past Ben Arbuckle offenses, and no, there's not like a ton of film because he hasn't been a coach that long. Mm-hmm. How much do you think they end up utilizing him as a receiver? Just in terms of what Ben Arbuckle's offense has allowed and what his skill set is and that kind of stuff.
I think honestly, this year is going to be a really interesting case study for that, because if Oklahoma doesn't land a difference maker at tight end, I think he provides you an opportunity to have somebody that's not out wide. So you're still, you can run similar things from a running back out of the backfield that you could from a tight end, just because it's coming from the box. So you can run similar things and have similar matchups. So I think it could be a huge weapon for Oklahoma. Now, if they do find a tight end, if they do find somebody that they like, or somebody emerges and becomes a difference maker there for them, it's just icing on top. But I think he does provide you an opportunity to use somebody, to utilize somebody outside of the receivers, especially if you don't have a difference maker out at tight end. So I could see it happening a lot, especially with how much, you're going to see the same things that you see everywhere else. You're going to have pre-snap motion. You're going to try and give the quarterback as many opportunities to read something pre-snap as possible. And if you can get a one-on-one matchup with Thought against pretty much any defender, you're going to take it.
What do you make of this addition at defensive tackle in Ricky Lolahea? Now, I know that is not his first name. They just call him Ricky. I don't want to butcher his name. I don't want to butcher it. It's just like, if you want to call me Jess instead of trying to mess around with my last name, I get it. Or just in case you don't want to misspell my first name, because I've gotten that too my whole life. And to kind of tying it into the David Stone discussion to defensive tackle, because David Stone coming back is so big, because you know who your top 4 is at defensive tackle, right? But there's still going to be games where like you want that 5th guy that maybe gives you a different look. And to me, when I'm examining what his addition could be, like, to me, he's like the perfect 5th guy. Like, he's a guy that could play 18 snaps if the matchup's right. He could be a guy that you don't really play that much at all, especially because I don't know what the playing time is going to be for him if that top 4 stays healthy, of Dominic Williams, Jaden Jackson, Grayson Halton, and David Stone. Like, if they stay healthy, all 4 of them are going to push over 300 snaps. So I just don't know how much playing time is going to be there. He doesn't have a ton on film. He started at Oklahoma State. They went to Utah State. Stats don't jump off the page. I look at his he's listed at 6'3", 305 on last year's roster. Kind of reminds me, DeJoun Terry was a little bit bigger, but he kind of reminds me of DeJoun Terry a little in terms of skill set. I don't know. Is this it probably just ends up being a depth piece. Probably. I don't know. Do you think it could be more than that?
Well, the way that I kind of look at this, Parker and I discussed this last night on the live. You look at this one of 2 ways. First, it's been a while since Oklahoma's probably been 6 deep at somebody 300 plus on the inside. So like you could just, and it's interesting that's kind of where OU is at, adding more pieces like that, because it wasn't that long ago 295 was the cap. On the flip side, it might not be a guy that plays a ton this year, but considering who you are set to lose with Grayson Halton being gone, Dominic Williams being gone after this year, He's got 3 years left, and so this is somebody that definitely could end up seeing his role expand in 26. So it's a good addition. I think it kind of gives him an opportunity to one, follow his former head coach, but it also gives Oklahoma an opportunity to build somebody that already has a good frame and something that they can kind of project onto and help build him out for the future.
Yeah, I think the way that I looked at it is when David Stone hit the portal and it looked like he was going to leave, I was like, oh my goodness, OU needs to all of a sudden OU needs to go get a defensive tackle that can play like 250 snaps
Yeah.
next year.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you're getting that from him, not this coming year.
No.
I don't think you're getting that. But that's why it's not just one guy. It's what David Stone coming like staying put and what he adds to. But that's the difference in one guy is now you look at this edition and it's like, oh, if he can make a play here or there, play a few snaps here or there,
Yeah.
that's great. If not, that's okay because he's not in that top four. That's in that create like that paradigm shift because otherwise if Stone was gone and this was the guy they were kind of adding to now OU I think probably would have been a little bit more aggressive in looking at other guys.
Sure.
But to me that's why he slots in for this coming season is like the perfect fifth guy. But I think if you were relying on him to play like steady reserve snaps, maybe that perspective changes a little bit.
Yeah.
And then I think let's talk just a little bit about Jake Michla and then I think this portal class as a whole and kind of now being able to outside of a potential addition or two, we kind of know what OU's roster looks like going into the fall. The moves have kind of been made. The more and more I've looked at Jake Michla, offensive lineman they added out of Stanford, I'm both excited and both curious at how he fits in on this offensive line.
Yeah.
Because he's built like a tackle. It's how he came out of high school.
Mm-hmm.
As a tackle, and he basically hasn't played tackle. And he played a lot. He's played both guard spots. He's played center. The more I look at this OU depth chart, Brian, it's like you could tell me he fits in at starting center. You could tell me he takes that left guard spot. You could tell me he ends up playing one of those tackle spops. If OU's not crazy about Jake Taylor. Or I mean, if Jacob Sexton ends up playing tackle, or some of these other young guys that they've got that they could play at tackle, maybe he fits in there. I don't know, but it's a really good addition. It crosses a lot of check marks for them. I don't know. Have you gotten any? It's been a little over a week since they added him. Have you gotten any more? Do you have any more thoughts on how he could end up being used?
I'm honestly. I'm intrigued most by how he's going to fit into this center position. Like I think if there's a spot on Oklahoma's roster right now or on the offensive line that could use an upgrade just from a length perspective, it would be there. I mean, Troy Everett is certainly. He has experience. He's proven that he's able to play at a level that makes it worthy of being on the roster at Oklahoma. Like that's not a question at this point. But I think if nothing else, one, it pushes him because you have another able-bodied, experienced guy going into fall. And then on the flip side of that, if he is able to beat out Troy Everett, which isn't a foregone conclusion by any stretch of the imagination. If he's able to do that, you're a little bit longer there on the inside, which is always great. So, it's interesting. With him being 6'5", I mean, typically you want your centers to be shorter guys, just because it's a little. You just want short guys with long arms if you could find them. So it'll be interesting to see how they end up playing that out. But his experience it's great. He's the perfect fit for a Bill Bedenbaugh offensive lineman because he is so versatile. Like that has been the one thing that you see throughout the years when Bedenbaugh has his best classes, his best groups. It's guys that can play all over the place. So he fits that mold.
Now that we, again, outside of a potentially an addition or two, we do kind of we have an idea of what this roster's like. This roster's pretty much set in stone outside of a stone, outside of a insert System of a Down reference here also, just to tie it all together.
Right.
We know what this roster is going to look like outside of tight end. I'm tired of talking about how crappy the tight end room is. We know how bad it is. We know how bad it is. I know how bad it is. It's a big question mark. Outside of tight end, what is, again, not in the interest of negativity. I guess actually, let me back up. How well do you think OU has done with these portal additions? Because to me, it's hard to answer every single question, but they've done pretty well. You got to give this staff a lot of credit, and Jim Nagy a lot of credit for what they've done. So I guess overall, how do you feel about this portal class? And if you had a position group that you still have some questions about outside of tight end, what would it be?
Well, because the tight end room's so awful, like there's no reason to even have this conversation. No, it's they did a great job. I honestly, looking at the class from top to bottom, you really tried to address and did a pretty good job of addressing most of your issues. You had some worries about the offensive line depth. You got that taken care of. You have difference maker. I mean, there are legitimately, if we're looking at this as potential difference makers in this transfer portal class, Ott, Mateer, Marvin Jones Jr.,
Kendall Daniels,
potentially Isaiah Sategna,
Giovanni Gibson, depending on
Derek Simmons is probably your starting right tackle. Like, not just that, but those were positions of need last year, and you went out and got guys that you needed. So for me, like I look at it from that perspective. I don't know that you could have done a better job outside of somehow finding a difference maker at tight end. But I think people are going to look at that a little cross right now, because it's so hard to land a guy. Any tight ends that are worth their salt are probably sticking around where they're at. That's just kind of a nuanced position. And you had a guy, you thought you had the guy in Devon Mitchell. It just didn't work out. So if there was a spot, or if there was a position group that I would say needs to be addressed still, I mean, the obvious answer is kicker, I think. I mean, I would hate for Oklahoma to go through all of this work in the transfer portal just to still have issues at kicker like they did a couple years ago, and that cost them football games. It would be poetic injustice at that point. But, you know, if they can get that figured out, I think they'll be okay. I mean, you could have maybe added a corner, maybe added another guy, but they seem to feel pretty good about who they have out there. And Parker made a great point last night. At this point, if you're not going to have the money to pay for a top end corner, you're probably better off throwing Cortland Guillory out there and getting him the experience after how he looked in spring. So I like it. I like what they've done. I think they've done a good job. They get the kicker situation figured out. I think they'll be okay.
That was a really good way to put that. It was going to be impossible to answer every single question with a perfect answer.
And
it was just
did.
And they almost did. You have to give this staff a lot of credit. Like you do. Well,
and the way that you just mentioned that, I think the Jaden Ott addition, because you didn't necessarily need a running back, I think that helps offset some of the production that you might not get out of tight end.
I agree.
I think because it's not one for one, no, but you're finding new ways of creating production. So,
well, and that's why, like, to me, cornerback is a potential question. It's not really a question; it's a potential question.
Yeah,
because everything in that room comes together pretty well if Gentry Williams is healthy and plays 40 to 50 snaps a game.
Yeah.
Everything is fine
Yep.
in that room. Now, like, yeah, you're going to need someone like Devon Jordan or Cortland Guillory or Jacoby Johnson to prove that they can play real snaps and be productive. Like, sure. But like, yeah, was the top end cornerback out there for one, and two, was the top end cornerback out there that was going to be worth to pay to bring in at potentially the expense of somebody else?
Right.
No. But that's outside of tight end, obviously, and kicker's a good point. I think cornerback is still, I think it's still the room I have my eye on, just because regardless, you're going to need a young guy to step up. And that room starts to fall apart a little bit if Gentry Williams isn't healthy. Yep. But again, it was going to be hard to perfectly answer every single question.
Right.
It just was.
This framing it this way might help people who are kind of on the fence about how they feel about this class. Take into consideration that you started this thing off by landing the most expensive transfer portal player in the country. The demand for John Mateer when he hit the portal was astronomical. I mean, it was, North Carolina was willing to make him the highest paid player by NIL standards yet. And he ends up coming to Oklahoma. With him already in the boat, you go out and land those other guys. It makes a huge difference. Like, I don't think you have any questions about Oklahoma's commitment to the NIL after how they handled things in this class.
I agree. And the other thing I'll add is I have potential questions about the wide receiver room, just because we don't know where these injuries are going to be and like how they're going to affect everything. But you're right. Like, from a purely addressing the roster needs, the biggest one being quarterback and just the offense as a whole, you have to be. They've done a pretty good job. Now the question is, how do you put it all together, stay away from horrible injuries, and win 9 games next year, 9 or more? I still have questions about that.
Well, this question was posed to me last night, and I immediately thought, I wonder what Jesse would say about that. Somebody tried to press Parker and I to lay out predictions for, like, lay out a prediction as far as win total goes next year. I didn't just throw out like a 10-2 or something, but I did say I feel like 6.5 at this point with where the roster's at, even with how difficult the schedule is. I feel like 6.5 is a bit low at this point. I know that it's a difficult schedule, but with all the changes, with Tennessee losing its quarterback, with like there are just so many things happening. 6.5 feels pretty low, but I was curious what you thought.
Yeah, I feel, man, I don't want to copy and paste my answer from last year because this team is going to be so much different. This team has, even with the questions at tight end, when you can, and a question at wide receiver and kicker and whatever else, even with how difficult this schedule is, this team has talent to win 9 games. It just does. And people like, it's funny because there's going to be 2 camps of people, or potentially 2 camps of people, that hear me say that, and one of them is going to say 9 wins is an impressive. That's a goal. Are you kidding me? And it's like, I'm not saying I don't get that. And then the other side of it is going to be, wow, 9 games with how hard that's, like, you're going to get both camps of it.
Yeah.
To me, unless there are significant injuries, there is no excuse for this team not to win 9 games. There's just not. That gives you plenty of margin for error. That gives you margin to lose the Michigan game, God forbid, and drop a couple in SEC play, or get into SEC play and drop 3 games with this hard of a schedule. Like, 9-3 should be doable. You should win a couple of tough games.
Yeah.
Like, you should. Like, 9-3, I think, to me, is the perfect, like, I think projecting anything more than that is unrealistic.
Yeah.
Not to say it's impossible, it's unrealistic.
Yeah.
And projecting anything lower than that, I think, is honestly underestimating and a disservice to the talent that is on this roster. So from a win total perspective,
I said 8.5 and you're nailing it.
I think 8.5. I was literally going to say 8.5.
Yep.
8.5, because to me, that's like, and God, we're so far away from the start of the season. To me, that's like they win a couple of games that you feel good that they won. Maybe that's Texas. Maybe that's at Tennessee. Maybe that's home to South Carolina, like a couple of games in that range, at Alabama, and that's losing a couple of games in that range.
Yeah.
And to me, it's all going to center around that Michigan game, which is, I know it's 2 weeks into the season, but so I guess all that, there's a long-winded way of saying, from a win total perspective, from a betting win total perspective, I think 8.5 is fair. And to me, unless there are injuries, maybe even 8 wins is still not horrible. But to me, with what this team has done, unless there are injuries, if they don't get to 9 wins, I would consider that a failure.
Yeah.
Is that the best way to put it?
Yeah. No, that's
is it 6.5? Are there places where it's 6.5?
It has been holding steady at 6.5.
To me, 9 wins is almost like a safe pick, because this offense was historically bad last year.
Right. And that's the issue that I think a lot of people in the national media are looking at. That they look at 6 and 7 and they see the loss to Texas and they see the loss to South Carolina and they say Oklahoma just wasn't competitive in those games. If you watch those games, I mean, I'm not going to dive into both of those games. Oklahoma was playing well with Texas until they weren't, and then you give anybody a 21-0 lead with like 2 pick sixes in the first 3 set possessions. Yeah. I think that's what people fail to understand is Oklahoma's offense was as bad as we have ever seen it since you and I have been alive.
Yeah.
That it was that bad. But the defense was good and should retain most of that. You know, again, these are we're starting to have. I need to pull us back in because we're having June and July discussions in April, and we have a long way to go still.
We do.
But, yeah, 6.5 feels really low still, and I just thought that was interesting.
Hell, even if you wanted to be pessimistic, which, look, I get that too. This is a team that's gone 6 and 7 2 or 3 years under Brent Venables.
Yep.
They should not have gone 6 and 7 in 22, and they should not have gone 6 and 7 last year. So, like, if you want to be pessimistic, I get it. I would have thought even pessimistically, you would set it at 7.5. Like, even if you wanted to be negative, because this team is objectively better than it was last year, at least offensively. And they should have beaten Missouri last year. Think about how different the perspective is, even if they don't piss away that game against Missouri.
Oh, yeah. It changes everything.
It changes. I mean, no, 7 and 6 is not horribly different than 6 and 7, but
you're probably not matched up against a Navy team it changes it changes everything.
Yeah, they should have beaten Missouri and they could have won a bowl game, and all of a sudden you're looking at 8 and 5 instead of 6 and 7. So it's like, to me, 9 wins seems fair. Let's talk about softball. I'm tired of talking about football. Let's talk about softball, because we've got OU Texas on tap. And buddy, I am stoked. Oh man, think about it. Also, more than a year ago, we made the trip to Austin, Texas for that 3-game series at Texas. That was more than a year ago.
Wow. Time
flies. But they're in Norman this weekend. That series starts Friday at 5:00. And Brian, I just think if you are not even a softball, if you're a softball fan, you're eating this up. This is going to be this has the potential to be one of the best series of the entire year, both regular season and postseason. So many questions about this. But even if you are just an OU fan or you just are a sports fan, this is a 3-game series against with two of the top teams in the country. They're arch rivals. These games are going to be nationally televised, all 3 of them. Like, I have endless things that I am stoked about with this series. And Brian, I mentioned this to you before we started recording. I'm looking at this Texas roster, and I knew how much they retained going into the year. I haven't got to watch Texas a ton this year, but it's like, oh, it's the same team. It's the same team as last year that went to the Champ Series. It's the same team. It's and like even casual OU softball fans, if you watched Texas last year, you'll remember Reese Atwood, Mia Scott, Jolie Mitchell, Katie Stewart. You'll remember Tegan Cavan, Gutierrez, Mac Morgan. Like these are all of these players that were huge contributors for that team last year are back this year. Texas is, what are they, 41 and they've won 41 games. I think they're 41-5, they're 42-6.
Okay.
42-6. They've been a top 5 team all year. They're not number 1 right now. I think that's Tennessee. Texas has been a top 5 team all year, but despite that, and despite how good of a year Texas has had, guess who has the same SEC record as them? Oklahoma. Both 13-5 in the SEC. And if I want it, and just to set the stage and the stakes a little bit more, Brian, in RPI right now, which is hugely important when it comes to postseason seeding, Texas is 6th. Oklahoma's 9. You want to be in the top 8. If whichever team wins this series is going to have a top 8 seed locked up to host regional and super regional.
Yep.
The team that loses this series isn't necessarily in jeopardy of that unless you get swept. Then if Oklahoma gets swept at home,
yes,
that starts to concern me a little bit because they end the season next weekend at Florida. And now you've got all kinds of pressure to win that series. So, Brian, I lay it to you. I have endless questions about this series and we don't have endless time. What stands out to you about this Texas team and this matchup as a whole?
Well, the continuity is huge. I think Oklahoma fans obviously are going to be very familiar with that construct. That's something that Oklahoma was a pillar for Oklahoma's success over the last several years. So I think that's a big portion of it. What I'm looking for in this series from Oklahoma is I would say this is probably the most pressure-filled series yet from a perspective of a young player. It's Texas. You've never been a part of that. You've only heard how this was. These two teams have met in 2 of the last 4, 2 of the last 3 national championships. You're hearing about all of that noise. Oh my goodness, these girls have been here before. All of the, there's just so much going on. You're at home and you're coming off of a sweep over Mississippi State. So it's a very interesting series from that perspective. And I look at it like this: if Oklahoma drops 2 of the 3, but they end up winning a game, and they're competitive throughout the weekend, for me personally, you take that as a win for this group. And that sounds so funny because they've won 4 straight national titles, but this group is so young. You're going up against a team that has been together since these girls were sophomores and juniors in high school, and it's a different standard right now. Now, again, I think the future for this group is incredibly bright still. I don't think there's anybody out there that would argue that. The talent is there. The experience just isn't right now. Now, I'm also not sitting here and telling you I don't think Oklahoma's capable of winning this series. I think that they have that ability. It's just not something that I would necessarily expect at this point. So, I'm looking for Oklahoma to be competitive and take at least one game. And if they can be competitive and maybe steal another, I think that would be a great sign for this program.
My disappointment, I would be disappointed from a fan perspective if Oklahoma gets swept. That would disappoint me. You're at home. You're not a guaranteed top 8 seed. This is Texas.
Yep.
Get one. You got to get one. I think Oklahoma can win this series. I do. I really do. I think Texas is the more talented team, and I think they have more offensive talent and more talent in the circle. But at least that's the way these two teams have played thus far through conference play. I mean, it's a Texas team. Look, they're not a juggernaut. They're not even. Right. I mean, Texas A&M is the top of the SEC series right now, or SEC standings right now.
Yeah.
This is a Texas team. I mean, look, they got beat. They lost 2 games to 1 to Tennessee, just like Oklahoma did.
Yep.
They lost a game to Mississippi State. Oklahoma just swept them.
Yep.
So it's not like this is a David and Goliath thing. These are 2 teams that are pretty even on paper, or like in the sense of what they're good at. Both teams are good at similar things. They both kind of have similar questions because there's been a lot of made about OU's pitching staff, and I'll talk about that in just a second. Texas's pitching staff has not been overly dominant.
Yeah.
Tegan Cavan has been amazing. Got a 1.5 ERA in conference play. They don't have another pitcher outside of her with a ERA lower than 3.4. So it's not like they have been absolutely dominant. And you look at the offense in conference play, at least they're batting 300, which is good. Batting 300 as an offense is good, but it's not like they're hanging 15 runs a game.
Right.
I think the thing that I wonder, I think we have seen this young team susceptible to the environment and getting, like you just mentioned, we saw that at Bama. Texas is not going to deal. Texas, this is a, as you mentioned, a roster that's been together. A lot of them are older. They've played in big games. They're not going to wilt under the pressure at Oklahoma at Loves Field. They're just not. I think we saw OU do that at home against Tennessee. I think we saw them get a little rattled. Patty's talked about it. To me, I think we've talked about the pitching staff all year. I think we can now add a wrinkle to that discussion. And Patty kind of talked about it on Tuesday. She said that, the plan moving forward is going to be to start Sam Landry games 1 and 3 and probably have her out there to close game 2. We just saw that against Mississippi State. We've talked about it all year about who's going to be the number 2 pitcher? Who's going to be the number 2 pitcher? I don't think they have a number 2 pitcher on this staff. Not a consistent go-to one that you start in game 2 every weekend. They just don't. They tried to do it with Audrey Lowry. We said it in the pod that never published. I said they're going to start Audrey Lowry game 2. They're going to give her the chance to be the number 2. She got pulled, I think, in the first inning.
Yep.
And then Isabel Smith, who's been bad all year and bad in conference play all year, was great. She pitched the most that any pitcher at OU has pitched in relief this year. She went over 4 innings. She was great, really consistent. Kirsten Deal, who was really great against Tennessee, was bad against Bama. They pulled her after 2 innings. She got 1 out against Mississippi State. That's all she played. And Patty said it on Tuesday. Games 1 and 3 is going to be Landry. Game 2, they're going to tag team it. So they're going to go with who they think matches up best against this Texas team. And I hope they can get 3 innings out of her. Yep. I think that's how they're going to approach this. I don't know. Who do you go with in this series? Who do you start with and hope not to get you 5 or 6 innings, but to get you 3? Because OU, even with Landry in the circle in game 3, they started games 2 and 3 down 4-0 in those first innings. And the reason why they came back was because Mississippi State doesn't have a good pitching staff. Mm-hmm. If you get down 4-0 in any games in this Texas series, you're toast.
Yep.
Who do you go with? I wonder. Who do you go with in game 2?
Me. I'll catch flack for this, but I think you throw Kirsten Deal. She's had some experience against Texas. She's been there. She's been in this kind of game, and you just kind of hope that you have her on the right weekend. Like that's maybe if you feel good about Isabella, like if you feel good about this week of practice, but that's who I would go with, but that's more of a gut feeling than anything else.
I like that pick. Deal pitched last year in Texas. She pitched in that series. She is the most experienced. Maybe you go with the player that you think is just going to be the most stable It'd be tough to throw a true freshman out there in this series and Audrey Lowry. I do think Isabella Smith will get a look. I just don't know how big of a look she'll get.
Yep.
And then offensively, I think if OU wins this series, it's going to be because someone outside of Landry stepped up and gave them a real spark. Not just like was good enough, like they were okay, but like, oh, they really limited Texas's offense. And someone else outside of Cassidy Pickering stepped up offensively. And like throughout the weekend, not in a game, not in an inning, but like finished the weekend with 3 or 4 base hits. And a couple of them came at a really pivotal time. Because not only has the offense not been there consistently enough outside of Cassidy Pickering, they're also not they haven't been great about capitalizing on momentum.
Right.
I think they're batting somewhere close to 200 with runners in scoring position in conference play. It's just not good enough. I don't know if there's a player on this roster offensively that you're looking at. I mean, I think the easy answer would be Ella Parker, who was a little bit better this last weekend, but it's just clear she's not healthy.
Yeah.
Isabella Emmerling finally woke up this last weekend. We got 2 home runs from Hannah Core last weekend. She's starting to provide a little bit. I don't know. If OU loses a series, it's going to be because they just didn't get enough offense.
Right.
I don't know. I actually think there's 2 players that I'm looking at, Brian. Okay. You tell me what you think. It's Abby Dayton and Ilana Agbayani. I think those are the 2. In terms of, we've seen Nelly do it, we've seen Gabby Garcia do it. We know Sydney Sanders can have a big blast, and Isabella Emmerling can have a big blast, but they haven't been consistent. Ella Parker's hurt. Those are the 2 players I'm looking at.
Yeah.
Because those are 2 veterans that have not given OU enough offensively this year.
Well, and that right there is where I was going to kind of take that and segue from it. It's the expectations that you had for this team coming into the year, and really through the first 2 or 3 weeks of the season, you expected, okay, historically these batters have been better. They will, there will be progression. they will figure this thing out, and then Oklahoma's offense will be potent. Well, Dayton and Agbayani were the 2 that I kind of remember thinking, yeah, like that, of course, like that they'll figure some things out. But yeah, it's just never come to fruition. And I think if you're going to get the most out of this team, those were 2. What is it fair to say that those were 2 that of the players you were more sure about production wise? Like it felt as if Oklahoma had a lot riding on Abby Dayton being like one of the lead bats.
Definitely Dayton. Dayton.
And then Agbayani, what she brings on the defensive side, but also as a base runner, like those were things that you kind of, and she's still been good in those spots, but it's just not. It hasn't been the impact that you had kind of hoped for, I guess.
Yeah, I mean Dayton's batting .298 in conference play, like that's fine. It's just not. It's just not great. It's fine.
Yeah.
Agbayani's batting .240. That's just not good enough. Right. Those are 2 players that, like, I think, because like the low hanging fruit is to look at Isabella Emmerling batting .209 or Sydney Sanders batting .186 or Ella Parker batting .152. That's the low hanging fruit. I think to me, it's like Agbayani needs to have a game where she goes like 3 for 4. Dayton needs to have a game Dayton needs to have a weekend where she goes like 4 of 9, 5 of 9, like something like that. Yeah. I think if OU is going to win this series, if OU doesn't win this series, that's okay. It just, and if they don't win, it's probably going to be because of the inefficiencies we've seen all year from a really young team that's still figuring things out. Yeah. If they do win it, I know it's at home. If they do win this series, that might shift my perspective a little bit as to what this team is capable of.
Sure.
Because it would pretty much lock in a top 8 seed for them. And it's like, at that point, it's like, well, if the matchups are right, and this team starts clicking over the last couple weekends of the year, then it's like, well, why couldn't they make the World Series?
Right.
And I think this team is capable of that. There hasn't been enough offense, and they haven't had a reliable number 2 pitcher, and it's really hard to win a ton of postseason games that way. It just is.
Yep.
If you throw Landry so much, she's gonna burn out.
Yep.
And at some point, you need someone outside of Pickering to give you some consistent offense. It's just hard to make the World Series that way.
It's not a recipe for consistent success. You can get lucky. Your overall talent will carry you out of position, out of tough spots playing like that. But eventually, it's going to fail.
Yeah.
And they just can't afford to play games that way, especially in the postseason.
So excited for this series, man.
I am too. It's going to be good.
It's going to be fun. That's going to do it for us here on this episode of the Oklahoma Drill. Appreciate you guys tuning in. As always, make sure to like and subscribe here at this OU Insider YouTube channel, or become a VIP, or not, I shouldn't say or, and become a VIP member over at OUinsider.com today. All kinds of content, both here and there, that you guys are not going to want to miss out on. But appreciate you guys tuning in as always. Appreciate you, Mr. Thunder, Mr. Brian Clinton himself. We'll see you guys next week on the Oklahoma Drill. Until then, see you guys next time.